Hi, join us here at PHA Media Building in London. I'm here with the founder of Anyway Up, Mandy Haberman. How are you, Mandy?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good stuff. We can see some examples of your product right in front of us. Briefly explain, I think, for anybody, I'm sure people out there watching will know what it is and probably have had one themselves, but what's Anyway Up?
Anyway Up was the world's first totally non-spill children's trainer cup. What was around before were sort of cups with a lid, spout, row of holes, turned upside down. It's a watering can. Of course, kids used to love that. So you had sticky mess all over the place. But Anyway Up has a little valve moulded into the mouthpiece. The child drinks, liquid comes out, turn it upside down.
It still makes me. It's
safe.
Okay, so how did that come about then? I mean, the design obviously is crucial and everything, and you can see the practical application of it.
Yeah.
But how did you think of it, and what inspired it?
Well, I'd had 3 children in very close range. I had twins, and then 18 months later a third one, so 3 small kids. And I'd been through as a mum the sticky floors and stains everywhere and forever mopping. And at the time I was sort of up to my eyes with it and I didn't think about it. But then when Emily was about 10 and we were at a friend's house, there was another mum there with a toddler. This house was immaculate, sort of cream shag pile carpets and pale peach upholstery and a lot. And this toddler ran across the carpet with a cup full of Ribena and just left a trail of pink stains across the carpet. And I looked at it, and being able to sort of stand back from it, I thought, that's ridiculous. What you need is something that seals by itself as soon as it comes out of the child's mouth. I mean, there's no point in having lids that you've got to shut or cover, because once it's in the child's hands, it's a watering can.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, you're a classic inventor then. You saw a problem and you solved it. Is that something? What was your background? Have you invented other things at this point, or what were you doing when you saw it?
Well, way back I trained as a graphic designer, but then when my youngest daughter was born, she had a lot of feeding problems, and in those days you couldn't get children home from hospital unless they were feeding orally. So I had to sort of improvise to find a way to get her feeding, because she was fed by the tube for 4 months. So I came up with I cut off half of a dummy and I syringed the milk in the corner of her mouth while she sucked on the dummy, and that got us out of hospital. But that sort of was the first step towards me being an inventor, because I felt so distressed and upset that we'd had to go through this awful experience. I thought, this is ridiculous. I need to develop this seed of an idea and turn it into a product so that other mums don't have to go through what we went through. Yeah. So that was the beginnings of this one, which is the Haberman feeder. And the Haberman feeder, it's been used in hospitals worldwide. It's like 25 years old. And it's still going strong. I mean, it's made a huge difference to millions of babies by now.
Wow, that's incredible.
I'm quite proud of it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Yeah. So, how did your business then progress? Talk us through briefly, because it was a long time ago. You created this. I mean, talk us through the life cycle very briefly of your company.
Okay, so I started out with a feeder, and that was from my kitchen table, and that was a mail order company. And I was supplying hospitals and parents direct. And then I had the idea for the cup, and I was sort of fitting that in around everything else. And I thought, with the feeder, it had been so niche market, I was able to manage it myself, one-man band, doing everything, cutting the teeth, sticking the stamps in the boxes, everything. But for the cup, because I knew that was going to be big volumes, it was a different thing. I needed to have salespeople, and it needed to grow properly. So initially, I thought that I would license it to a company, because that's what all the books tell you to do. You've got an invention, you license it. So I went round to see about 18 different companies that were in the commercial baby market. And they all loved the idea. I showed them my prototype. They all thought, the holy grail of trainer cups, fantastic. But what I showed them was a fairly early basic prototype. Some of them thought, well, it might not work in production. Others thought, well, maybe, but you come back to us when you've got a finished a production prototype. So I ended up walking around with it in my bag for about a year, thinking, I've got to do something with this. I know it's a really needed product, and mums wanted it. I mean, they wanted the prototypes. So in the end, I teamed up with two guys who were sort of marketing people, and they said, look, before you worry about licensing, why not take it to a couple of trade fairs, see what the response is like, and if the market response is good, set up your own company and we'll come on and help you with sales. And that's really what happened. So we went to 2 baby fairs. We took about £10,000 worth of advanced orders based on a prototype. I wasn't in production, I didn't have anything.
Right.
I spent 3 months practically sleeping on the factory floor trying to get this thing right, put it out there. And we did it.
So you had this problem of supply and demand. And
I had demand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how did you get around that? I mean, you say you slept on a factory floor pretty much. I mean, was it just you for all that time?
It was me and the guy who ran the factory. I found this lovely little factory in North London. It was the most unlikely place, but a really lovely guy. And he was very supportive, and we just worked and worked and worked. And eventually, tweaking, and we got it right, and we didn't lose a single order. So,
wow.
And that actually is interesting because it showed the demand for the product, because it was 3 months from those initial orders to actually supplying them. I think we lost order for 1 cup. Everybody was so desperate to get hold of it that they hung on.
Yeah, and that demand didn't wane at all, did it? It just got bigger, and then you found yourself in one of the, probably fair to say, one of the country's leading supermarkets now.
Yes.
How do you want to tell us how you got into that supermarket?
Yeah.
It's quite a creative way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, firstly, we knew that to be big volumes, you've got to get, at that time, it might be different now with the internet, but at that time we had to get into the supermarkets, and we'd sent them flyers and price lists and everything else, showed them pictures, and they'd all said no, not interested, you're a one product company, we don't deal with one product companies, so hop it. So there we were. I thought, well, they've all said no, so what do? We decided to be slightly radical. We took one of the cups, we filled it full of concentrated Ribena, and we put it inside a white cardboard box where it was just sort of rolling around. There was no poly bags or cling film or any of that stuff. And we sent it through the post to the buyer, the top buyer of Tesco's. Little note inside to say, if this reaches you as a soggy mess, well then we've shot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
But if it arrives and it hasn't spilt, would you give us a ring? And so we put this thing in the post, and then the guys were chain smoking, and I was we would have had Valium, we'd have been swallowing the Valium. Absolutely wrecked. Anyway, about 4 days later, the phone rang. She'd got it, and she said, "This is amazing, and we have to have it." There was none of this waiting for range reviews. It was, we're going to take it, get it into store. So it takes a little while to sort of pipe fill and get the whole thing going. But we got it into Tesco's, and then once you get one of the majors, the others tend to follow on.
Yeah.
So by the end of our first year of, well, it was actually about 9 months of trading, we were already into our first 2 supermarkets. Chains,
incredible.
Which was brilliant.
Incredible, and something important for anyone watching to remember, because they're at that very start-up point, and so they need to think creatively if they're going to get into the big boys.
You've got to be different,
yeah.
And that's the thing I've learned, is that these people, they're inundated with so much stuff that you've got to really stand out. You've got to make them, smack them in the face, basically.
Yeah, totally. So, and of course, with any invention comes with it a whole host of problems, because you have to protect it.
Yeah.
How is that? How did you go about firstly protecting your intellectual property and obviously patents?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think everybody knows now that you have to, if you have a technology, that you have to apply for a patent.
Yeah.
If you've got a design, you apply for design right. I mean, there's lots of different types of intellectual property. And I knew about patents. I mean, I learnt about them when I did the feeder. And I thought, like everybody else at that time, certainly, that you have a patent and that gives you a 20-year monopoly in the market, and there you go.
Yeah.
Once your patent's granted, you're on your way. But the reality is that a patent gives you the right to enforce a monopoly. It doesn't give you the monopoly, and you have to enforce it at your own cost. And what happens is, if you do something with the feeder was a very niche market product, so it wasn't really worth lots of other companies copying it. There wasn't a huge market, it was niche. But if you go into the commercial market and you take 40% market share away from the market leader, you can anticipate what's going to happen. And I think there's an awful lot of cynicism of big companies. They look around at little companies that have IP and they can think to themselves, well, they've spent all their money getting this far. If we just take it, what are they going to do about it? To enforce your patents through the courts in this country is hugely expensive. The chances are, if they rip off your idea, you're going to lose heart. You're not going to have the resource to actually fight. So it's carte blanche, and that's really what happened. We were in the market. I think we've been in about 18 months, and we were just, we were selling. I can't remember exactly at that stage, but I mean, we were selling a couple of million cups already. It really escalated, and along came Tommy Tippy, and they came out with a product which was very like the early prototype that I'd showed them, and they stole our market from under our feet. So it was a question of what the hell do you do? Litigation is very risky, it's hugely expensive, or do you just turn the other cheek? We couldn't license them and remain viable ourselves in the marketplace. And if we decided in the end, if we didn't put our foot down with them and make an example of them, then all of the other companies in that market would also copy.
So you took them on?
So we had to.
So you took them on and you won?
We went to the High Courts and we won. It was very nerve-wracking. But
That's one for the small business.
Yes.
Well done.
You don't mess with this, really, I tell you. And we then, that's when our sales zoomed up. It was like 4 million and it just was going great. And then, of course, we had infringements in America and Europe, and they all had to be dealt with. But on the upside of all of that, and yes, it's horribly scary, and I wouldn't advise anyone to rush into going to court because it's nasty. On the upside, having enforced my patents, I now have American companies coming to me asking for licenses. So it's a complete turnaround of where I was at the beginning when I was out there touting it.
Yeah, so a bit of perseverance paid off, and obviously all that,
the
dragging
works.
through courts.
You just have the bottle to stay with it.
So where's the company now then? 2011. What are you doing with Anyway Up? Yeah,
right. Well, previously what I did, having set up my company in the mid-90s, I eventually licensed out and I exploited my IP through lots of different licenses around the world. But my licensee in the UK last year went into administration. And I decided that they hadn't been doing a brilliant job on the brand, and I can see so much more potential for using the brand, for using my story. I'm very different to the rest of the businesses in the market. I want to get it out there under my own steam, so I formed a company. I've got a fantastic team of people, and we've got new IP, new products, a whole range of products, and Anyway Up will be back very shortly. The next couple of months we'll have Anyway Up back on shelf.
Oh, super.
We've got a new cup, and that will be followed by our Pièce de Résistance, which is a new bottle for the general market, which I think is amazing. I mean,
what can you tell us about the bottle? What's special about that?
Let's just say it's better than a bottle.
Better than a bottle.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get my thinking cap on. I'll see if I can. We'll have a bet in the office. Who gets closest.
Yeah.
So finishing then, you're clearly very, very successful in the early 90s, and now it seems like you've experienced every facet of business possible, with intellectual property and administration, and then relaunching and branding and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What's the hardest part, do you think, of all that, of all of your journey? What was the most difficult?
The hardest bit.
Tough question to answer, probably.
It is. I think certainly the hardest bit was the decision to take risk. I wasn't a born risk taker. When was brought up to be a nice girl. You don't sort of get into conflict
Yeah.
with people. You try and please people.
Is that to say you're not a born entrepreneur then? Because many people would argue that that is what an entrepreneur is, a risk taker.
Well, I think I am. It's just clouded by upbringing and
Yeah.
all of the things that I thought that I ought to be. But when it came to the crunch, I found I've got balls. I mean, I didn't know I had them. I think a lot of women don't know that they've got balls. But they've got to look a bit harder, basically, than the men do. I think it was all there. It just needed a bit of encouragement to come out.
Yeah, totally.
And now, I'm more of a risk taker than my partners.
Right. So you're still very a one-man band, so to speak. Are you?
No. I mean, we formed a company, Haberman Products Limited, and that's going to be. We formed a distribution company. We have our own distribution. We're going to have our own manufacturing in the UK, which is amazing. People say to me, the UK, nobody manufactures in the UK. Why aren't you doing it in China? The answer is that if you have a product that can be automated, can be done in a very sophisticated, efficient way, so much so that your labour costs are not great. I mean, our labour costs are going to be very small. Then you're just down to material cost. And material cost is the same around the world. So why make it in China when you're going to be 6 weeks on the sea and you've got to warehouse it and all of the reliability issues, when you can make it in-house and respond just like that to your customers.
Absolutely.
So,
well, we look forward to seeing them even sooner than expected then. And so, just to end then, Mandy, you've, like we keep saying, you've been in business for a long time now. Have you got what's your top tip for anybody? Say someone's a bit like you, they've spotted a problem and they've got their solution. What's their first step? What do they do? I
think your first step is to look at your market and be absolutely certain that people are going to want to put their hand in their pocket and pay for it.
And how do they do that?
Hard-earned cash. Well, with the cup, I sent out a questionnaire and I was asking people about their experiences. You mustn't give anything away, so that's the hard bit. You've got to keep it secret and yet ask all the questions. So I asked them about their experiences with trainer cups. What drove them nuts, and if there was a solution, what would they be prepared to pay? So it was that way of getting the information without actually saying, look what I've done. And then at a later stage, I actually, once I had my patents applied for, I sent out products to people and with another questionnaire which gave me more information. But there's absolutely no point in getting yourself all excited about a product and thinking, this is it, so I'm going to make millions, and spend, it costs money to develop products, it costs money to take out patents and insurance and all the other things that you're going to do, and it's a lot of time as well. And unless you're absolutely certain that this is something that people distress purchase almost, they must have a must-have product. If it's a must-have product and it's good, then protect it up to the hilt and go for it. Okay, great bit of advice to end on. Well, we look forward to seeing your better than a bottle in the next few months, maybe next year. Yeah. Look out for it, everybody. I'm looking forward to it immensely. Thanks for joining us, Mandy. My pleasure. Thank you. Just try that one. No? You're too used to it.